This video is by Straight Goods News, SGNews.ca.
Talking to Maher Arar. It's Wednesday, November 20th in Ottawa. Maher Arar is probably Canada's best-known Syrian and one of Canada's best-known human rights advocates. We know a lot about your history, Maher, but we don't know much. I think Canadians aren't as familiar with what you're doing today. So perhaps you could tell us about your current activities.
Well, I'm involved in many projects. One of them is an online outlet that I founded in January 2010. It's called Prism. The URL is www.prism-magazine.com, and the focus of Prism is on national security and related subjects such as accountability and transparency, and everything that has to do with government secrecy. We all know the importance of those subjects. For instance, since 9/11, governments have become a lot more secretive in their dealings, especially with foreign agencies, with countries that do not share our human rights standards. So it's a very important topic, and Prism grew out of my frustration, with mainstream media. While there were and there are still good investigative journalists, there are very few, and we all know they're not free to talk about everything. So I thought, by launching such an online project, I would be able to bring this topic to the forefront.
And how do you feel about your progress 2 years down the road? Not so much in terms of the publishing industry, but what you've been able to bring out, the information, the people you've been able to bring together.
Well, I have brought in many experts, in fact, Canadian as well as American experts. Even though so far Prism has been run by volunteers, I'm proud to say that we have achieved a lot. I do not recall now the number of op-eds and articles we have published, but given how small Prism it is, I think compared to other outlets, I think we have done a lot. We have also produced various video clips. Again, it's mostly national security, but we have realized over time that we can never just restrict our attention to national security, because there are other intertwined topics that we have to cover, so that we could understand the overall context of national security. In fact, we have been recently also focusing on foreign policy.
Now, you're a computer engineer by trade, and you've become something of a self-educated national security expert. What are the issues around national security that concern you the most?
Well, what concerns me the most is the state of lawlessness that many of the intelligence agencies have been in. So basically, to put it in simple words, the gloves went off after 9/11. So that's particularly worrisome to me. It's like, who are they accountable to? Like, my story is only one of thousands of other stories. What also worries me is we do not know what is being done in our name. Governments have become so secretive to the point that you can never get, like, for instance, if you happen to travel frequently and you happen to be of Muslim background and you're stopped and you're not allowed on a flight, there is no way for you to know why, whether it's the Canadian government or the US government and some European governments. You will never be able to find out why. Is it because of your ongoing activism? Is it because you're Muslim? Is it because you happen to have associated with people in the past that you don't even know had some connections to terrorism? There is no way to know why this is the case, and that is very troubling for me, because we live in a democracy where transparency should be the norm, not secrecy. So secrecy should be the exception in a democracy, and that's what worries me, is the future.
Yeah, I understand an awful lot of your work in national security ends up focusing on the United States, but we're a Canadian outlet, and I'm interested in the Canadian implications of some of your work. What are the secrets the Canadian government is keeping that we ought to know about?
We don't know. Just yesterday, I was traveling back from Toronto, and I was selected for random screening. So it's not the first time, of course. So if I ever decide to find out why, will I be able to, you know? And I would never even try because I know it will be a frustrating process at the end of which I will never get an answer. So, and I'm just maybe one of thousands of people. So that right there, that's a good example, you know. Another good example are our intelligence agencies still dealing with governments like Syria or Iraq or Jordan or Morocco, for example, who torture people to get out information, from them. So those are issues that have, I think, are still gray. We don't know much, and unfortunately, what I find is journalism as a whole in Canada has become a 9 to 5 job. Whereas in the past, where you used to find like journalists who were ready to work on investigative pieces for long periods of time. Nowadays, it's just 9 to 5 job. I have to file my story by 5 and go home and relax. So that's troublesome to me. Like this is not supposed to be like journalists is a 24/7 job. I think and it is journalists who will be able to hold our government to account. And if they are not doing this job, who will?
Now, many Canadians watching this interview might say, well, I'm not Muslim. This doesn't affect me. I'm not Middle Eastern. This doesn't affect me. Are they wrong?
I think that our history tells us that this attitude is wrong. I can cite so many examples. The Jewish community, for example, they used to be discriminated against, the black people. And when discrimination happens and we don't take action, we will be affected eventually. A very good concrete example. Right after 9/11, just the day after, Muslims started to be searched at airports for no reason but because they're Muslims. They used to, go through a very, harsh type of questioning or interrogation or even searches, right? Mm-hmm. And no one cared. The mainstream, I would say, white citizenry, they said, well, this is not us. They never said it verbally, but that was the attitude. And if you recall, just 2 years ago when those machines at the airports became extremely intrusive, then everyone started talking. Why? Like, we're upset, what's going on? So the question I'm asking, if people took action right back then, the early stage, would this have happened? Would our government have spent billions of dollars installing a machine, some of which we don't, I think, even need? I just want the government to tell me, whether it's the Canadian government or the US government, whether those machines caught any terrorists. In fact, there is, as far as we know, at least the public information we have, tell us that they have not. So that questions whether this was a good investment or not. In fact, it's to the contrary. Since those machines were installed, we have at least 2 people who were still able to go through. The one who was sent from Yemen, for example. And so right there, that tells us that if we don't know information about what our government is doing, how are we supposed to keep the government accountable? So to answer your question, I think, governments normally target weaker communities, and that gives them the motivation later to target the wider population.
What about snooping? There have been, the Harper government has introduced various laws that have been quite controversial and that will enable police and law enforcement to get at your cell phone, your email, your internet. How big has the snooping industry become in Canada?
Well, it's a huge industry. There's no doubt there's various lobby groups that have interest in increasing the surveillance state capability to, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, whether it's in Canada and the U.S. In fact, Ottawa as a city has become the hub of for governments to buy surveillance, whether software or hardware.
What can they do? What are they capable of doing now?
Well, with the introduction of voice over IP, it has become a lot harder for intelligence communities to spy on people. It's extremely challenging, and the challenge has been that, what do we do? How do we do it? So there were various companies who, were launched within the last few years to actually solve that problem. And what the government want from the Bells and the Rogers and the Telus is direct access, a backdoor to various communications. Of course, the government will always use the argument like, there are pedophiles out there, there are criminals, which is true. It is true that this technology is being exploited by. What I have issue is not the fact that the government is asking for those increased powers. What I have issue is when they introduce such bills or laws, this do not come with the appropriate checks and balances. Okay, they do not, for example, increase oversight to the same level. If you increase surveillance, then you have to increase oversight with it. If you look at how the government, where the money went within the last 11 years, the increase of the CSIS and RCMP budget is way up here, and the oversight is still down there. And that's the problem, I think, is the oversight part of especially so that the surveillance have become extremely intrusive. Just recently, I don't know if you know, but the Communication Security Establishment, CSE, is building a huge structure to house it's a new staff, it's new. So do we yes? Do we even know why they want this? Do we even know? Even my wife Monia, she wrote a good piece for Rabble.ca about that. So. Yeah, it's, why are we spending $800 million on a huge structure like this? Aren't we better spend this money on something else? So this is the kind of things that we have to start talking about as citizens.
How do you contrast the national security activities in this country with the United States, where you've done a lot of research?
Well, we always follow, right? We always followers, unfortunately. And I through my experience and through the readings I've done, it just seems that the United States has always exercised direct or indirect pressure on Canada to follow suit, right? I don't think, to be fair, I don't think we have gone as much as, in terms of abuse of civil liberties. So that's a credit, but I think that's mostly attributed to the fact that we Canadians, I think, value civil liberties more. We're not ready to give up, but we should not be complacent at the same time.
I'd like to talk about Syria a little bit. You are Syrian. You have more experience with the Syrian government than you would like to have. Tell me your impressions of what's going on in Syria today.
Well, there's a lot of confusion, right? There are people who think everything is a conspiracy. People who have opposed imperialism for a long time believe that it's all conspiracy, right? And that if I want to prove that I'm anti-imperialist, I have to side with Assad against the West, okay? So that's part of the story. The other part is people who, at the other side of the spectrum, they say, well, there's no conspiracy at all. and so on. So we have to bring down this regime, right? I think to analyze Syria on its own, it doesn't give you the whole picture. Okay, I think you have to look at the wider Middle Eastern situation. We all know the facts now that the Arab Spring, as some people like to call it, started in Tunisia. Was it a surprise to me? No, it was not surprised. I was not surprised that this wave of revolution started in the somewhere in the Middle East, because it's overdue. There was so much oppression, there was so much dictatorship, so much injustice, and so that I think there was a popular revolution or popular uprising, if you want to put it that way, because revolution is an ongoing process, right? It doesn't end just overnight. So, and the main reason people revolted is not because of Western intervention. I think the main reason people revolt is because of the injustice they see on a daily basis. Okay, now I personally believe that the United States and many other Western governments have been caught by surprise, and they were not expecting anything like this to happen. There are people who say, well, no, the United States has been preparing and funding bloggers. That's true. I do not want to deny this, but I don't think they controlled everything. Okay, I think they were taken by surprise. Up until this day, I, for one, believe that the United States does not have a clear policy with respect to what's happening in the Middle East. They don't know. They don't have a clue about what's going on. They don't know how to deal with the situation. Of course, like usual. So basically, just to come back to the issue, so what happened in Syria is not separate from what happened in Tunisia or Egypt, right, or Yemen. So it's a popular uprising. Now, what happened is, as always, Western governments wanted to ride the wave, right? And they wanted to protect their interests. So, and that's when they, started maybe to influence events on the ground. But I don't think the extent of their involvement is huge, as some people would like to portray it. I think now the situation in the Middle East has really changed after what happened in Tunisia. People are a lot more aware of what's going on. I mean, it is an insult to say that this is strictly a conspiracy, because if you say that, then you're insulting people. Like for instance, Syria, right? There's so much being talked about, like, oh, it's the West who are arming the rebels and all of this. If you dig down into the details and you analyze the situation and you read various reports and you read people on the ground and you analyze the various, you will come to a conclusion that what you're reading about in terms, it's all gossip. In fact, it is not true that the CIA has been arming rebels. It's the contrary. They are actually stationed in Turkey, try to limit the supplies of weapons or the types of weapons the Syrian rebels use. So I think emotions have to be separated from facts on the ground when analyzing the situation in Syria. It's extremely volatile. Yes, Qatar has interest. Yes, Saudi Arabia has interest, and they are actually funding part of the year. Yes, but the politics is much more involved than the simple answers yes or no, or it is a conspiracy or not. It's just never clear cut, right? But one thing is sure is that people there have been oppressed for a long time, and they are simply just rising up against the dictator. And now, what will the end of this be? I really don't know at this point in time, but I believe the situation will stay as is for a long time to come.
Where is your heart?
My heart in terms of?
In terms of the Syrian conflict.
Well, I think I sympathize with the legitimate demands of the people. You know, I'm extremely worried and concerned about the involvement of some Western countries that they would like to really basically guarantee that the outcome of this will be in their favor. They are trying. There are plans. Whether this will be succeeding or that, whether this will succeed or not, it's a different matter, and we have to remember that it's planning is one thing, and controlling is another thing. Some people go as far as say, well, they're controlling. I don't think so, but I think they're planning to try to have a favorable outcome to them. So my heart is with the Syrian people. I really do not believe the plans will work. And for a simple reason, people in the Middle East have become a lot more aware. They're talking about politics now like never before. And from my various readings, and especially the youth, you know, I don't think people are naive anymore.
Finally, we have another exchange of bombardments between Israel and the Palestinians in Gaza. Do you have any reflections on that based on your experiences and people you're in contact with?
Well, again, it's emotional, right? Some people have emotions about what's going on, but I think we have to look at the facts. You know, the facts speak for themselves. There's occupation. There's suffocating blockade. There's targeted killings. So for people to just analyze the situation in terms of Hamas throwing rockets or Israel replying back with missiles, I think if we think about it like that, we're not doing justice to the to the story. We have to look at the roots of this. We have to look, at why this is happening, right? To go with emotions, it will get us nowhere. Who killed more, who killed less? But we have to look at the facts. We all know that the people in Gaza have been living under blockade. 1.7 million people living in a tiny, crowded area. We know stories about, even boats have been prevented from reaching Gaza under the pretext that this, they will be delivering arms to Gaza, right? So I really think we have to look at history as well. Who is the occupying force here, and I, for one, believe that violence brings violence. The solution to all those is not through military force. In fact, the only guaranteed outcome of the assault on Gaza will be two things. It will bolster Hamas's reputation. Second, it will actually weaken Abbas. And I would not be surprised that within the next few weeks or months, there will be an Arab Spring in the West Bank. So those are the two guaranteed outcomes, and maybe the third even guaranteed outcome, that's Israel's reputation will even be damaged more.